Matt Plummer here. This weekend I went to an election integrity town hall hosted by our board chair, and while I didn't get to stay for the whole thing, I think it gave some indication of where we can expect the board to take things on the election issue. Now, if you've been following along over the last year, it has been a wild ride around this issue. I did a video kind of updating folks on this back, I think in September, so you can go back and look at that if that would be helpful. Where will the board likely go on this? I think they are probably going to try to identify examples of concrete voter fraud and then have people present those during public comment period at the Board of Supervisors meetings. Now, by voter fraud, what I'm describing here and what I think in the town hall it was referencing was examples where, a dead person voted, or a person who moved out of Shasta County voted in Shasta County, or an example where someone voted twice. So concrete, hard examples of that happening. Now, again, I'm not saying whether or not that exists. I don't know. But let me say two things about this. Number one, if I was a supervisor and someone presented an example of concrete voter fraud like I just described, I would take it upon myself to figure out, did this actually happen, and work with the relevant parties and stakeholders to figure that out. And then two, if it did happen, why did it happen and how widespread it is? I would ensure that we track this down and we make sure it's not a widespread problem. So I just want to say, and I think anybody who cares about our elections and our democracy would do the same, and I would hope that they would do the same. Number two, I think that this is where the board should have actually started. To the extent these examples exist, start with the concrete examples rather than these broader, more grandiose claims about someone selecting the public officials and the elections being rigged, which, our board chair just made some of these claims as recently as a month or so ago. And so I want you to hear this, and then let's talk about these claims.
Elections have been manipulated at the county level for decades, and it must stop. And this may be the case to do it. We have analyzed our races here and have found outside influence into our county, and it just can't be any longer. What is the point for a lot of us running campaigns and working hard if this cheating is going to continue at every county level? And in fact, I think people are being selected for office, not being voted in.
Now, unlike concrete examples of voter fraud, these claims are a bit harder to get your head around because I think, and I know this is an emotionally charged issue, but if we just look at it logically, that there are really only three different explanations for how this could be true. Number one is that the elections are being rigged and our officials in Shasta County are being selected and have been for the last few decades, but the people who are doing it are not very good at it because they still allowed the board chair to win, who's making these claims, and other people who do not agree with this way of doing elections, and it would remove their very way of selecting leaders. And so maybe someone is rigging the elections, but they're not very good at it. Number two is that maybe someone is rigging the elections and selecting leaders, and actually the board chair is part of that, and they're actually selecting him. Now, and again, I'm not saying that that's what's happening. I'm just saying that is a potential explanation. The only challenge is that he's won in 3 elections in Shasta County, but I believe he's also lost in 3 elections. And so maybe they supported him at some point and didn't support him at other points. It's a little hard to follow the logic there. And so the third, potential explanation is that no one is actually rigging the elections, but maybe there are examples of voter fraud that are happening in the midst of our elections here in Shasta County. And so those 3 explanations of, yes, someone is rigging the elections and they're not very good at it, or number 2, someone's rigging the elections and the board chair is actually part of that process because he's been elected, or number 3, no one's rigging it, but there might be some examples of voter fraud or strange anomalies that do happen. I'd be curious what you think. Which seems most reasonable to you? Am I missing an explanation here that could be true, that could explain how this is happening and how this claim could be right?